Hi, this is Tom Needham, and you're listening to The Sounds of Film. And I'm so excited to have on the phone with us right now a true legend. I'm talking about film composer John Debney. He's an Academy Award nominated composer, an Emmy Award winning composer, and he's done so many films through the years that we've featured right here on the program that it's amazing. Just some of those films include Iron Man 2, Passion of the Christ, Elf, Bruce Almighty, Princess Diaries, and The Emperor's New Groove. His newest soundtrack is Young Messiah. John, thank you so much for joining us on The Sounds of Film.
My pleasure, Tom.
Well, John, you've done so much great work through the years. We can't go through your entire career, but as you look back at your long career, are there several moments that you would say were real important moments in terms of your career that you can kind of identify as like this film or that film?
Sure. I think in anyone's career, what you can look back and sort of pick two or three or four of those sort of seminal moments where you felt either at the time or after the fact that they were important sort of stepping stones. I would say always my first foray into major studio feature films was for Disney for a film called Hocus Pocus, and that was, I think, approximately in 1992.
Yeah.
And before that time, I had done a lot of things for Disney, but I'd also done a lot of television.
Right.
And through a series of, stroke of luck, actually, I ended up on Hocus Pocus. James Horner had to pull out at the last minute. He had a scheduling conflict. And so Hocus Pocus was sort of the first one that comes to mind. Then there are things like Cutthroat Island, which is sort of infamous, but it was a big score that I did in London at the time for a movie that didn't perform, but nonetheless, the score itself seems to be beloved by a lot of film music fans, and I'm really thankful for that. Then we kind of fast forward, just giving you a brief history, I'd say Passion of the Christ, of course, because that was probably the most important film score I had done to that point, and that also enabled me to get to the big show, which was a lot of fun. It's the first time and only time I've been at the Academy Awards. So I'd say those three things, and then coupled maybe with a big one that I have coming out called Jungle Book for Disney. I think those would be on my top four list.
Well, I definitely want to speak to you at length about Passion of the Christ. But as you already kind of alluded to, you've done a lot of different types of scores, and so many film composers that I speak to sort of get stuck doing a certain type of score. Not you, though. I mean, you go from one type of film to another, one genre to another. How do you do that? That's great that you can.
That's a great question. And by the way, I do agree with you. I think whether you're an actor, whether you're a composer, whatever area of the business that you're in the entertainment business, I think there is a tendency for sure to get pigeonholed. We all do. And for whatever those reasons are, and some of them I'm not even sure the why of them, Tom, but I've just been very, very lucky, actually, to do a comedy one day, and then the next time I'm doing a thriller, and the next time I might be doing, a big thing like Iron Man 2. I would say a lot of it's, quite frankly, luck, and the other side of that coin is just a lot of preparation. I've been such a student and lover of film music all my life that for whatever reason I seem to soak it up. I study it, and I get to have a lot of fun. Whether I'm doing a Western or I'm doing, like I said, a thriller, it's fun for me. And that's just, I guess, the way my brain works. I'm a little schizophrenic like that.
Well,
it's fun, certainly.
Yeah, well, what I hear a lot from other composers, though, is that they would love to be doing what you're doing, but they're just not allowed. They only get calls for certain types of movies. So I guess my question for you is, how do you convince, I mean, now you have a track record in all these different genres, but in the beginning, how were you able to convince directors and studios that you were capable of handling all these different
another great career related question. Early on, I literally think, Tom, it was a lot of just trial and error, to be quite frank. I spent so much time in television that I was able to sort of hone my craft, as it were, and got a really good sort of training ground and preparation for what would come. And again, you don't necessarily know it at that moment when you're in the trenches of doing television or I've done a lot of ride music, like for Disneyland and others. I just think it's all about training, and there are times when, I've been called in times past to make up a demo for this or that, and sometimes you just don't have the material. So really what I would do is I would many times write music for something, and most of the time wouldn't get a job, but over time, you develop a library and you just kind of keep trying, and then when you do get that opportunity, that's sort of the crucial part too, isn't it? That you have to make the most of an opportunity once you get it. And again, as you mentioned, I've been fortunate enough to be around long enough where I have sort of a great volume of different genre work, and that's really served me well. And again, it's been a lot of fun.
You mentioned that you did some music for Disney theme parks. Which music did you do?
My goodness, I have done so much. I did a lot of music in my days right out of college. I got a job at Disney Studios in their music department, which was wonderful, and I was doing music for things like Epcot, the World Showcase. I've done everything from, at Disneyland, I've done things like Splash Mountain.
Wow.
I did much of the Fantasyland music, like Casey Jr., Railroad, and the Teacups, Alice in Wonderland. And I've done a lot of stuff for, like, Paris Disneyland, for instance. I've done Small World Paris. I've done things for Tokyo Disneyland. So I just have this thankfully long history with Disney, and I've gotten to do lots of things, lots of big Disney things. Like, I would say the most recent would be the big 60th anniversary celebration at Disneyland. I did the big World of Color show, which is people might recognize, the big wheel with Disney on it, and with Mickey on it, with all those wonderful lights and the kind of a beautiful light show that is. So I've been really fortunate from the early days working in the library over there to kind of continuing in this process, of working for Disney.
That's a whole separate genre in itself, Disney park music, and I'm actually a big fan of it. I was kind of curious, in particular, what was it that you did? I know it's a very narrow question, but for Splash Mountain.
I did the whole soundtrack. So, in other words, all the music you hear in there, I arranged. It's all, music from the film and the songs from that film, but that was a joy. And again, many of these things that we're talking about are over 20 years old. I think I did Splash Mountain. I don't know how long it's been open, but that was when I did it. I did it right when they were conceiving of the ride. I remember looking at the drawings with the guys, and talking about when you fall down the big water slide and what that should be. Just all kinds of that kind of stuff. I've been, again, privy to a lot of magic.
That's really amazing. I mean,
it's pretty fun. When I actually sort of look back on it, sometimes I just shake my head. I'm just the luckiest guy in the world to have done all these different and various kinds of things. And the park stuff especially is fun because that has quite a long shelf life. As you can imagine, I'm taking my grandson down there and I'm listening to tracks that I did over 25 years ago. So it's really, really cool.
Wow, that's exciting. If we can kind of switch gears a little bit, and you mentioned Passion of the Christ, a huge film, an amazing score. You've toured the world doing concerts with that movie.
Yeah.
I've read so many interviews with you. I don't know how much you want to get into it again for our listeners, but from what I've read, this was a very personal score for you, and it brought up
Well,
a lot in terms of your own faith and all that.
Be glad to talk about it. It was personal for a lot of reasons. It was a rough time actually in my life, right when that film happened. The timing was such that I had lost my mom, I think the year before that. So there was a lot of sort of personal trials and tribulations that I had been going through, and kind of lost my personal faith along the way. And when that film literally fell in my lap, and it literally did fall in my lap, it was just this kind of awakening of spirituality in my life. And so it was very important to me to get that right. And of course, when you have such a great filmmaker like Mel pulling it out of you, and he does, he's wonderful to work with, but he's also intense, and he really makes you dig deep. So it was a wonderful journey. It was a difficult journey, but certainly I'm just overjoyed how powerful that the music seems to affect people, how powerfully it affects people. So, and I know that still to this day, because we, as you said, we do go and do concerts around the world where we'll play this oratorio that I wrote that was based on a lot of the themes from the movie, and people still seem to be very touched by it. And I don't know all the whys and wherefores, but there's sort of a universality, I guess, to it, and the music does embrace a worldview, using instruments from that area of the world, both primitive and then, of course, the orchestra, which is sort of, is the background for everything, and then the vocals, which are, always so stirring when you hear a great choir. So, on so many levels, that the passion just, it still affects me to this day. I get emails, and I get a lot of really heartwarming stories sometimes about people who love that music and why, and which parts of it really speak to them. And so it's a real honor to be 10, 12 years now away from it. It's an honor to be involved with it.
Is it true that the process of making the music was a unique experience for you? I've read things where you said that you really felt this battle of good and evil, and things of that nature.
Well, I'll put it this way: when you're in the trenches of it, of something like that was such a such a powerful experience, I think you fight yourself a lot, and I think there were personal sort of struggles of me just wanting to make the music as good as it can be, and also dealing with the subject matter. It's not the easiest film in the world to watch. So there was a lot of that going on. A tug of war between lightness and darkness, and I would put it that way. And nothing terribly overt, but it was just a very deep kind of personal journey, and for everybody concerned, by the way. And I think we all worked very hard. I know I lost weight during it. I mean, it was intense. I would liken it to going on a campaign if you're in the armed forces.
Yeah.
you go on this thing and you just work as hard as you can, and the result is the result. And I just feel fortunate again that it was such a successful result.
Well, it wasn't just successful in terms of the art. This is one of the most successful commercial films of all time. And I was wondering, did you know when you first set out to make this film that it was, number one, going to be so popular with a huge segment of the audience, but also be so controversial as well?
Great question. The answer is no on both fronts. I don't think that Mel had any kind of inkling or had even dreamed that it would end up being what it was. And I mean that sincerely. I remember the first weekend when it opened, took the family up to see it in a Cineplex near us, and there was a huge line out front. And the disconnect for me was I was thinking to myself, oh, I wonder what they're in line for. Well, it turns out they were in line for that movie, and the rest is sort of history. So we really did not have an inkling of really how deeply it touched people. And the other part of it, the controversy was the controversy. We didn't, it was what it was. I always like to say, and I said it back then, respect everybody's opinion. And it just was what it was, and we had to keep our heads down and just kind of do the work, and that's what I ended up doing. And again, all the while respecting anyone's opinion about it.
Right.
I was really concerned with just making the music as good as I could be, and that was sort of what I focused on.
Was it ever hard for you when you saw with this film, or even in later years, some of the attacks on Mel Gibson, who I guess you worked closely with on this film?
That's a hot potato. I would say when you care for someone, you make mistakes in your life. I think it was hard for everyone that cares about Mel to see that. But then again, what's the old adage? Like, nothing that isn't painful isn't.
Yeah.
The pain sort of makes it real. And again, I think Mel would. I can't speak for him, but
yeah,
I think with hindsight, I think he would say, as I would say, that I certainly respect anyone's opinion, good or bad. If it's not your cup of tea, it's not your cup of tea. And if you're offended, I respect that. And this is just, I always felt this is just one story about one faith. And, I bet any story about certain faith you might get that kind of reaction. So I guess it may go with the territory, although, again, I respect everybody's point of view.
Well, yeah, I have to agree with you. I was thinking back to when I went to see the movie, and it was a similar thing. I went to a multiplex. It had been in the news, and I was like, I have to go check out this film. I did not know what to expect. It was like a weekday, I believe, and it was sold out, playing in multiple theaters, and I think a lot of religious groups came in by bus and stuff like that, because I had gone to this theater like a million times, and it just seemed like a totally different crowd. And all I can say is I've never seen anything like that before in terms, and I'm not even making any judgments. People were so moved by the music, by the film. People were crying. People were shouting. It's like an experience I'll never forget. And it's pretty incredible.
Very powerful.
Yeah. But in any case, you have a new film out now, Young Messiah, and some interesting music. Tell me about what was your approach for this film?
Well, it was certainly fun to go back and re-explore a lot of these instruments and a lot of these kind of textures that I created for In the Passion. So I was very excited about stylistically what I wanted to try to do with this movie. Yeah, quite a different movie, though, of course. This movie, The Young Messiah, is about a little boy and his family and the life at that time, and about sort of this little boy's journey into what he's being told, or who he is, and who is he really, and so it's a journey of light, it's a journey of love, and it's It's all about discovery and love between the mother and the father and this child, and sort of the plight of what traditionally we have been told or what we've read happened. And I think it's just to me, it's such a beautiful film that I think it's for everyone. I think that you don't have to be of a certain faith. I think it's just a lovely film speaking about a family during that period, and this little boy who's kind of awakening to something otherworldly, and it's grounded in the love in the family and the acceptance. And so I can't say enough about it. I just think it's a beautiful little film.
Well, that's great. Can you tell us a little bit about the process that you went through in doing the score for this film? You mentioned some of the instruments. A lot of different composers tell me that they'll read the script, they'll talk to the director, they'll think about the themes, and then they go off by themselves. What was it like for you on this movie?
Well, this is similar to my normal process. I've worked with this wonderful director before, Cyrus Norashta, and we did a film called The Stoning of Soraya M. a few years ago, which is a really terribly powerful film, socially relevant film. And so we'd worked together before, and I love the guy, and we sort of developed a friendship and a kinship and a shorthand in how to talk about music. And in this film, in the case of this film, I again didn't have a tremendous amount of time, so we had to sort of, he had a very tight schedule, and I came in and I had a very tight schedule, and so we just sort of got to work. The way I usually start is I watch the film a number of times, and I just start to hope. I hope that I'll start to hear a melody in my head. And I'll just sit at the keyboard and play a little bit, and just sort of try to come up with the thematic material. That's what I try to do first. I do read the script as often as I can. If I'm offered a script, of course I'll read it. But I'm such a visual person that my process really starts when I see the visual, because it just, I don't know, all our brains are wired differently, but that's the way mine works. I like to see the performances and kind of soak in the locale and the color, and that's sort of what I did. And again, we didn't have a whole bunch of time, but we made good use of it. And then I, again, got to work with this wonderful group of musicians that I use often on these kinds of movies. And we ended up in London recording an orchestra, and so it all came together, and I think to lovely effect.
That's great. We're speaking with John Debney, and he's speaking about his latest score to Young Messiah. One of the things that's so fascinating to me is that you write this music and it's made for a film, but then very often a CD comes out and the music sort of takes on a life of its own. And you spoke already about the fact that you go out and you do concerts with Passion of the Christ. How important is it to you, or not, that the music that you write for movies does exist separately from the film?
Well, good question. It's wonderful when the music can come out in some form, be it digital and or CD. I hope, I strive with everything I do that it will take on its own identity with the film that it's supposed to be from. I've always felt this way, and it's maybe it's just me, Tom, but I like to try to imbue each score with either a theme or a hook or something that people can hang on to at the end of the day. It's that old walking out of the theater humming it.
Right, yeah.
I mean, you hope for that. So, maybe I'm a little more sort of cognizant of it in my own work. I just try to make each one have something that the last one didn't have, meaning that the melody is different, or that maybe why some of my scores sound so different from each other, because it's sort of a conscious choice that I like to explore. I like to try new things. I certainly hope I'm not writing the same,
No, not at all.
Oh, I hope so. And I think any artist would say that. I think.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I can say definitely from my end is that you said that you like to try and create a good melody that will stick in your head. I don't know that that's true for all film composers. Especially ones that work only in the action genre or horror or something like that. Although sometimes horror, there's some great melodies. But I've been playing your scores for years, and it's not hard with each film to find a track. It's hard on the radio if you don't have the movie playing. You got to pick tracks that the listener can just enjoy, and I always find something on your soundtracks, something that's very easy to put on that works alone, and so it's great. I know we have to kind of wrap this up, but just only I wouldn't even ask you this normally, but because we're talking about Young Messiah and we talked about Passion of the Christ, there's always been a long connection between religion and music and spirituality. And I was wondering if you can just from someone who has composed music for one of the most successful religious films of all time, what is the connection in your own mind between religion and music and what it can do?
That's a great question. I think you could teach a whole course on it.
Yeah, really.
I my background, I come from a very sort of studious music background, meaning starting with Gregorian chant. Obviously, that chants were very prevalent in the early church and in Christianity, certainly. So I love to look at the roots of any religious belief and just sort of get into that music. And so, in many cases I've done it. I can't say that I've studied every single sort of historical iteration of religious music. I certainly haven't done that, but I've done that sort of in the Christian music world. I've had to do that in the sort of traditional Jewish and Muslim world, just to kind of attune my ear to what those scales are, if that makes sense, and what those instruments are. Because I've always wanted, at least I strive, to stay as authentic as I can. I think even the casual listener, when they hear some music that isn't maybe grounded in tradition, that it's kind of a poor copy of something. So I've always made a point, and I did certainly with Passion and The Young Messiah, I sort of make my own little study of this music, and try to at least familiarize myself with it and the tradition and the sort of the harmony of it, so that when I do it, that it's going to be authentic. And again, not going into a long history of things, but certainly, I bet we could assume that ancient Mesopotamian cultures had primitive flutes and probably primitive skin drums and who knows what kind of other instruments there were. So I think there's always been that, idea that when a group of humans get together, they invariably want to share, and I think one of the ways they probably did that was through musical language, I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah. Well, you do it really well. And I want to thank you for, providing so many memorable musical moments through the years in your movie scores. We've been speaking with John Debney. You're listening to The Sounds of Film. His latest score is Young Messiah. I suggest that you check it out. We're going to be playing a lot of his music today on The Sounds of Film. And John, if there's ever a chance, I would love it if we could just do a whole nother separate interview just talking about all the Disney music that you've composed for the theme parks. That's a whole other subject I'm very interested in. And
absolutely. I'd love to do that anytime.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Check out Young Messiah, everyone. And John, thank you once again for joining us on The Sounds of Film.
Thanks so much, Tom.
Take it easy.